Well, for several weeks now, Beth and I have been reflecting with you about our experience of the wilderness and the story of Jesus' time in the wilderness at the start of his ministry. It's easy for us, I think, to recognize the pain in Jesus' story. And so we have been talking about times when life is difficult, when life feels out of our control, when we might feel empty or awkward, tempted or overwhelmed. Being in the wilderness can feel like a sort of punishment rather than a choice. And it can be easy to focus on the challenges of being in that wilderness rather than the joy that is possible while we are there. And yet, Jesus' story actually begins with a moment of profound celebration as he is baptized. And then it is the Spirit of God who leads Jesus into the wilderness, where he is tempted to take shortcuts and find easy solutions, but instead, he keeps looking for the presence and the guidance of God and discovers, I think, a new and renewed sense of his purpose and identity. And I think that we all know at some level that true joy does not come to us without experiences of suffering attached, without having to do some difficult things. Even allowing ourselves to feel joy can take courage, because when we open our hearts to feel joy, they are also open to being broken and being disappointed. And we don't want to open ourselves to that. So let's think about something simple, like dancing. Dancing is something that can bring people great joy. But dancing in public is one of the most vulnerable things that people can do these days, or don't do these days. Think about the times that you have refused an opportunity to dance. I expect you have one, or many. Why didn't you do it? If you didn't join in with us with our wild Rumpus silly walk a few minutes ago, why was that? There can be lots of reasons, I know, but the biggest one is probably because we don't want to look foolish in front of others. We feel awkward and vulnerable, and it takes courage. That's why the saying is, dance like nobody's watching. So, given what you've experienced this morning, it might surprise you, or maybe not. But I can remember lots of times when I have chosen not to dance. And frankly, it was because I was nervous, afraid to be so vulnerable in that circumstance. I was nervous this morning. But when I skipped it, when I stepped out, when I said no thanks, I know that I missed out on an opportunity for joy. So this is probably a good moment to remind you about the opportunity to join the dance Easter Sunday. Just saying. I think women who have given birth are maybe the best ones to help us understand how pain and joy are part of a package deal. But I think all parents can testify to that in a lot of ways. And all of us, whether we're parents or not, have some experience of that. Think about the most important moments of your life. My guess is that they have a combination of struggle and celebration. I know that often at a funeral I will quote William Blake, who wrote, "Joy and woe are woven fine, a clothing for the soul divine. Under every grief and pine runs a joy with silken twine." I also recall hearing someone talking about feeling like their life was a series of trapeze swings, either hanging onto one and swinging along or hurtling between them. And that the in-between transition space, when you let go before you grab onto the next one, might be thought of as a scary, confusing, disorienting wilderness part. It is also the only place in the journey where you are flying. Perhaps this is why Jen Hatmaker, who Beth introduced us to last week, talks about the wilderness as a permanent home, which is both happy and hard. I know that's not where we think we should live. We think that life should be easier. Things should happen faster, quickly. People who are good at things make it look easy. And so we think it is. We forget that, as Malcolm Gladwell noted in his book Outliers, it takes many years of concerted effort and practice to become a true expert in your field. Worthwhile things seldom come easy to anyone. The start of Jesus' ministry begins with a combination of wilderness and celebration. I think because it was the combination that grounded him for living the rest of his life. So I think part of the invitation for us in the wilderness is to embrace this often hard and challenging life, rather than trying to escape the difficulty of it, to find the joy within it. So that's the Lenten challenge we've set for ourselves this week, to look for the glimpses of God right in the mess of things, to be grateful for and celebrate the grace and the joy and the surprising moments of wonder that's right there in the wilderness of our living, to create celebrations, to sacramentalize. See, in the church we say that sacraments are a visible sign of an often invisible grace. And we have those official ones like baptism, communion, but there are informal sacraments too. And when we stop and notice, when we light a candle or say a prayer, when we express our joy without reserve, and when we receive these moments as gifts from God, we're marking the ways that God is touching our lives. Sacrament. And if you don't know where to start, you might look for inspiration to those who are practiced at appreciating things we don't often celebrate, like the Dull Men's Club, or the Park Bench Appreciation Society. After all, you never know when the ordinary can unexpectedly turn into something rather extraordinary. Think about David Grissenthwaite from Kirkcaldy, Scotland. David has kept a diary of every time he has mown the lawn since 1984. And yet these diary's entries have turned out to be important for research into global warming being carried out by the Royal Meteorological Society. Because although the time spent mowing varies year by year, the diary clearly shows that the average annual lawn mowing period has increased by 1.5 months in the 31 years he's been recording those mowings. Extraordinary. Who knew? Or we might be inspired by the drab little gray West Coast bird called the American dipper. See, with a few exceptions, animals, including humans, or at least this human, react to foul weather by hunkering down, retreating, hunching, curling into a protective little ball. But not only does the dipper keep doing her merry little dance through every fury of winter, sometimes with her face actually tilted into the weather, she actually turns up the volume of her song. The dipper, in a nutshell, doesn't just endure harsh conditions, she thrives in them. So, here we are in the wilderness. God is here among us. There is much to celebrate. So, to quote Max in Where the Wild Things Are, let the wild rumpus start. Amen and amen.